Hey everyone, slightly different look and layout this time as I am in a different location to usual. I'm recording this from the banks of beautiful loch in the Highlands in Scotland, and I'm joined today by my good friend Ross Hudgens. Ross is the founder and CEO at Siege Media, and at Siege they specialize in the content side of SEO in particular, and they do a lot of work for e-commerce brands just like we do at SearchPilot, but covering some completely different areas of expertise, which is why I think hopefully this conversation is going to be interesting and useful to both our audiences with a bit of luck. So Ross, thanks for taking the time to join me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, it's always good to chat search.
Love it. Always up to geek out. So I thought maybe a good place to start, given particularly on our side of things, the SearchPilot audience skews towards the technical and on-page side of things. You're coming from the content side. What are e-commerce folks in particular? What are they coming to you for most at Siege these days?
Yeah, we have a very strong design team, both graphic and visual. So on the content side, it's definitely simpler. So you could make the argument that AI is replacing a lot of that generally. So where we still have value in that chain is very high fidelity work generally. So it could be redesign of a content section, and then in turn, like custom design images that visualize a mattress size chart or different complex ideas that search results are showing users want. And kind of as Google has mentioned, multimodal search behavior and the things of that nature. That's one big ask, is kind of the upper end content quality. And then the other side, there is a good amount of digital PR. So that, as I was prepping for this chat with you, Will, I researched on trends, and there's just like a massive inflection point actually that I maybe felt, but didn't actually see the data for until I showed it with you. So that there's an interest
folks should
for
definitely
sure. Yeah.
definitely check that out. If they head to Google Trends and just look for digital PR, you can. That's the search, right? It's just complete hockey stick, even though it's been around for a good long while now. Do you think that's being driven by the AI changes in discovery as well, that folks are thinking that that's a good way of influencing how they get recommended?
I think so. I mean, it seems like the brand unlinked mentions is becoming a bigger conversation. I mean, I do think there's an element of like anecdotally sometimes it may be, as someone who offers digital PR, they may just feel like that fixes their thing. They still need a brand. I think it's more you need a brand. And they think digital PR is the next kind of adjacent SEO thing to do. That seems like it. But I would educatedly guess it is a lot to do with AI and LLMs for sure.
Yeah, because that was actually an interesting angle I was curious with, was when folks are coming to you for all of that high fidelity content and design work that you were talking about, how much do you find that they have in mind the strategy, the measurement, the way they want this to tie into everything they're doing? Or how much are they coming to you saying, it looks like you have a hammer and I'd like you to hit some things, but you need to tell me the plan as well?
Yeah, I mean, it varies. I think they do generally have a strategy in mind, whether or not it's the right strategy and we kind of position it in the right way. I mean, we do find, as I'm kind of mentioning here anecdotally, digital PR may not be the right fit for a lot of e-com companies. Like, it's strange to be a media company, many of them, and like even talk about data. It's like that voice for like an upmarket luxury handbag company. You wouldn't show survey data, or at least in the traditional context of what we SEOs think of a digital PR. So that it's often misguided. And one way we redirect them is like, if you just go high quality content on the blog, you may attract you will attract a lot of high quality links that maybe just doesn't come through outreach necessarily. So that's one of those kind of strategy repositionings that originally started with one client, is like, oh, we just want content. And then we talked to them. They had a link building budget. And we were like, just make better content, merge these two, and now you actually have a strategy that should perform long term.
Yeah, I think you've been leading the way on a lot of that strategic thinking, because you really do tend to put the budget into the content, right, rather than the outreach these days.
Yes, I mean, we are doing more outreach. We are not considering. We're close. I mean, it depends on when this publishes. We're kind of like, I have more in my mind of like, we need to go maybe not purely to traditional PR, but PR things traditional PR teams would do. and not just promoting an asset that lives on the website. Like, what are the other functions we can do as SEOs that help build brand and measure unlinked mentions? Unlinked mentions are a thing we're talking about more often, and clients seem to buy into that we were not doing a couple years ago. But you're right. We don't do as much outreach, but I think part of my head has gone towards we can do more if it's just actually brand building activity. And the problem is so much SEO work is like not brand building. It's kind of like crappy 10 best cities. Yeah. kind of thing.
Yeah. That was something that we always found back in so for anyone who doesn't know the history far enough back, before SearchPilot, I ran Distilled, and we competed in various friendly ways at a few times over the years. And when we were in the content game, I think the measurement piece and really getting a holistic measurement strategy that clients would buy into through thick and thin, through good times and bad, was tough. It's easy to, or it used to be easy to think of the what good looks like in the abstract. But then when you're actually looking at campaigns, you're looking at the results of working together over the course of a year, and folks are deciding whether to work with you for another year. It can be tough to tie those metrics to the real business goals. I think so. I'm very interested to hear where your thinking's gone on that.
Yeah, well, we do less pure for links, and I think that's one thing that has helped us. So it's kind of like if we're ranking for something, and you can see this whole content section is now much higher lift, and it's generating links, it becomes a easier argument to make. To your point on that, we're also, I don't know how it took this long, but our new technical leader, Shannon, has been great. We're going to hire a dedicated analytics person to hopefully solve this problem for the first time, help our clients build attribution models. And I mean, I'm curious your thought, Will, but it feels like generally this is going to get worse though. With LLMs and impression data, it's going to be very hard. We're still going to need like gut level buy-in to some degree, with some hopefully strong confidence intervals on top of that, of like, this is a top, like a lot of people came into the homepage. We're going to have some gut level belief that some other SEO impression level stuff, digital PR impacted that. That could be hard to like really, really attribute well, but maybe you've seen better ways of doing it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right across all of that. And I think there is value in the more detailed attribution measurement, trying to get more decimal places out of things. I think there is also just a strategic alignment, isn't there? There is just, like you say, having folks buy the concept and get behind the idea. This is how we want to portray our brand. This is how we want to build our brand and grow our brand. And I think I pulled out one of the things in preparation. I was reading your Instacart case study that you have on the website, which I thought was a really interesting one because obviously e-commerce centric, that's where we play a lot these days, but it was developed out in really interesting ways. And one of the things that I was just curious about, because it's a couple of years old, I was like, I wonder how that visibility is going in the in that site section. And it has held up, it looks like from the outside, really strongly through all of the helpful content updates. And a lot of folks are struggling with their more with their less commercial content, with their more media centric type content, whereas that seems to have really stood the test of time. And it seems from the outside like a big chunk of that is the strategic alignment, is the fact that it's not some kind of tangential thing hanging off the side. Is that fair?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, they're generally without sharing too much of their strategy. I mean, they are pretty tight, and it's evolved over time. It's not always been perfect in terms of alignment, and we've learned about what's performed and what has not performed from a content type perspective. But if you think about the content types for them, I think a lot of it are like the things that may drive that Instacart action generally. And I think they're holistically a good example of a brand that continues to build as they have grown and their brand search is growing. And I think that is a good indication of just like who's winning right now. I think we can take some credit, but I don't think we can take all of it by any means. They're spending so much on marketing. And that probably, and what we're seeing today is like that lifts search a lot of times, even if
Halo lift in both directions. I expect. Yes. I think the that kind of high end, the design led stuff, all of those kind of more conceptual pieces that you were talking about. I think clients feeling proud of that work is really important, and I think there's spillover effects into the broader team. I remember. It was always great when you'd get the kind of more anecdotal reports, if you're in B2B or something and folks hear about it in the sales funnel and the sales team are saying, oh, hey, folks are bringing up this piece of content regularly, and you start hearing it from leaders across the business, not just the folks who brought you in. And as you say, I think that's only going to get more messy as those recommendations aren't just your content. They're also what happens when you put that through an AI recommendation engine or a chatbot or whatever, and it becomes better at recommending your brand because it's read all that other stuff. On that note, you've just put out the piece, your homepage study, which I would definitely encourage folks to have a read of. We can link to it from our social media and everywhere else people get their links. But so the punchline, the headline is that you found that homepage traffic is up over 10%. And in recent times, a change you're attributing to a combination of AI overviews and other large language model references, mentioning brands. So kind of recommending you, but not necessarily directing people to any particular part of your website. Can you tell us a little bit more about this study, how you did it and what you found?
Yeah, it was kind of just like a breadcrumb trail of thought process of like, oh, impressions are up, so what should be a byproduct? Now let me test that hypothesis that homepage should be up. And then obviously on Google, it's a little more direct that we can see that impression data. On LLMs, to my knowledge, there isn't a great source for that as of yet, but we can do those searches ourselves. We can see referral traffic is growing, so there's probably even more non-kind of mentioned or non-linked mentions. So started testing that hypothesis, and sure enough, yeah, it was pretty significant, especially on the B2B side. On your audience side, retail e-commerce, it was a little bit lower. I believe it was 8% to the homepage in overall lift, but still a positive lift. And there was a little bit more of a click decline. I think that's sort of breaking out, and maybe it's one thing I want to talk about at Instacart before we go too much further, but there's simpler queries on the B2C side on average. So maybe those are getting cannibalized harder than B2B is one guess. And then maybe consumers are not adopting as hard to LLMs. So maybe therefore the homepage lift yet is a little lower. But there may be exceptions that are like younger audiences in retail. But for the most part, that seems to be accurate. And just to note on Instacart, I think one thing I saw the Backlinko team talk about this as well. Calculators, interestingly, I think are defensible in a nice way. And you talked about things that impress. We do have a decent amount of calculators for Instacart, and those are not getting cannibalized by AI overviews. You could make the argument you could use LLMs and Google them, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of AI overviews there. So I wonder if that's part of the defensibility recently, is a lot of those calculator terms, generator, converter, like you may do those on LLMs, but there's not AIOs really. So that might be part of the reason we're holding up for Instacart pretty well also.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think I would expect also there may be a bit of, going back to the difference between what you're seeing in B2B and B2C, there could be we've seen different adoption curves between business users and consumer users of the AI tools. There could also be the fact that the denominator is different. If you think about just the huge volume of homepage traffic that B2C sites get, for that to go up 10%, if you see what I mean, like there could be a huge navigational element to that. Whereas the volume of even the really famous B2B brands, like you call out MailChimp, for example, it's nothing compared to a major B2C retailer. So that could be part of the effect, I guess, as well, that even if it's up in large numerical amounts, it's not as big a percentage change.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I probably could have, there's so many ways we could have sliced this data, but to that total.
But it's absolutely fascinating. And you've got tons of data in there. So as I said, I'd recommend folks check it out. One of the things that I'm finding particularly interesting, exciting, I mean, it's always kept me interested in search, is the pace of change. And I think, we're talking just after Google I/O with, the full rollout of AI mode going even further than the AI overview side of things. One of the things that I've been trying to get my head around is that in e-commerce in particular, there is that transaction that has to ultimately happen if the consumer is going to get what they want. And so there's only so much disaggregating that the LLMs can do, right? The ChatGPT isn't going to ship you a pair of sneakers. And so although they are there's some interesting experiments of connecting in, like product search type ways and maybe even agentic purchasing. I'll believe that when I see it. But I think the fact that you're competing for that, you're not just competing for clicks. Clicks don't pay the bills. You're actually looking for the purchases. We're kind of expecting to see like fewer higher qualified clicks, quite likely. But ultimately, the more users are satisfied, the more they end up buying. So that total purchasing power on the internet isn't going anywhere. And yeah, I'm curious if your clients are talking in interesting ways around this. One of the things that you were asking about how we're measuring things. One of the things that we're evolving towards is measuring more metrics and aggregating more metrics. So what I mean by that is, historically, we've tracked a lot of our experiments against organic traffic, often just Google organic traffic, depending on the scale of the channels we're working with. And we're increasingly, even before the AI side of things, we're measuring, for example, product search traffic as its own channel, essentially. So having a hypothesis that a particular change might change the traffic that you get from Google Shopping, measuring it separately to the total organic traffic. So one of the things we're doing is breaking things down, so slicing and dicing that data more finely. And as with that, everything's always disaggregating or aggregating. The other thing we're doing is bundling data together. So one of the things I'm quite interested about, and it hasn't moved the needle, it's not big enough yet for any of the folks that we've seen, but I'm expecting to see more long-tail, deep referrals into websites that is basically dark traffic. So, we've seen what is apparently a bug out of Google, that they're not sending the referrer data out of AI mode, which I kind of believe that it smacks of sites that launch with their no index staging website. Is like Google didn't want this showing up in people's referrers when it was in testing, and they've accidentally rolled that live. But others are not, right? So I would expect that at least some of the LLMs are going to be sending dark traffic. It's going to be unmeasurable, and it's going to just show up on your website. And some of it will be homepage, like you mentioned, the kind of unlinked recommendations. But that isn't a good user experience for many things. If you're looking for a specific product, you don't want to be just told, hey, the Macy's has that product in stock. Like you need a link to the actual to the actual product, the PDP. And so we're going to see more of those deep links. I particularly think AI mode is going to get a ton more links out from it. But when we look outside Google, a lot of that traffic is going to be dark. It's going to just show up on your website, and it's not necessarily going to be attributed. And so I think we're going to bundle a lot of that into our experiments. We're going to say, hey, as we evolve for example, our product detail pages, do they get more all source traffic? Traffic from every source. Whereas historically we'd have broken it out by just looking at Google, for example. We're going to start talking about, is it getting traffic from all sources, trusting that, yes, sure, some of that long tail traffic comes from people emailing it to their friend or whatever, but most of it is some form of search or recommendation. And so, yeah, that's kind of where my head is at on this, is like disaggregate the data and reaggregate the data and measure both.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, we've talked previously at lunch, and I'm not plugging this, but we're a light investor in Optiversal, and the founder there just sent me data about their specific pages. It's a like long tail product, and he sent me, he's going to be on LinkedIn shortly, but this screen share, you can see what they do is they basically take review data to find long tail, to essentially like pet food for picky eaters, where you previously didn't have a picky eaters page. and kind of automatically generate that. But to your point, Will, like you'd think that super long tail would be relatively fat from maybe it's dark traffic or if it's not getting attribution. That's probably coming from LLMs. I imagine as you get closer to the chunky, it'd be harder to see. But if you almost like
For sure.
emphasize the long tail, you know there's also an effect on the short tail. Hypothetically, it would be my guess. Yeah.
That's a huge part of what we see across the long tail for e-commerce is the that distribution of how optimization works. Essentially, is that if it's working across the long tail, that's a very, very good signal. It makes me also think of another angle of it. So part of the reason that our kind of testing can work in an LLM-driven world is that they're all doing RAG, right? Retrieval Augmented Generation. So the AI is doing the searches for you. Right. So you see this almost every query I do on Gemini now goes to Google search. I think ChatGPT is still underpinned by Bing, and we're seeing the growth of what that query volume looks like behind the scenes. I don't know if everyone saw the demo in AI mode of what I think they call it fan out. So you do one search, the AI goes and does dozens of searches in the background, and like rolls all that stuff up, reads all of it, aggregates it all. It's a bit like deep research in those models, and so you don't have to wait for a retraining of the models to do better, to get recommended more. If you just rank better in traditional SEO type contexts for the searches that the robots are doing, they will recommend you more. But that is such a hard thing to measure. That, I mean, this is why we're doing the kind of tests that we do, but it's a hard thing to measure. But I guess from your perspective, you're also seeing that as that's essentially the outgrowth of digital PR, isn't it? Is that you're potentially ranking on some of those less commercial type, more brand-led queries that the robot is doing in the background, and it's getting this brand impression. And so when it rolls up into the commercial query, like straight away, you're getting more visibility, more references there.
Yeah, hypothetically, if you get co-citation with your core terms, like if it's CRM software, HubSpot, in that digital PR, you're hypothetically influencing that corpus of information that shows that. I mean, I think there's some interesting. The small amount of pessimism we got about our study is that a lot of that impression growth is exactly what you're saying. Is that actually real humans a lot of times? I do want to take another step of like.
I think it probably is at this stage.
Yeah,
because I don't think we're yet seeing a growth of agents browsing the web and looking like humans. So showing up in the kind of data that you're analyzing, the analytics data, we see a ton of bot traffic, right? So huge, and there's been some really interesting studies about the ratio of the amount Google crawls you to the traffic they send versus the amount that OpenAI crawls you, or Perplexity, or any of them, Anthropic crawls you versus the traffic they send. And maybe that deal is breaking down, but those are bots. Eventually there may be agents that go out and do your bidding and go and browse the website kind of on your behalf. I think the stuff that we're actually seeing in the real world right now that looks like the deep research. So yeah, if folks haven't tried this, it's in AI mode, but it's more prevalent. I think people will have seen it in ChatGPT or in Gemini. If you turn on the deep research toggle and follow the chain of thought, it says, I'm going to go and do this research. Hey, I've read 70 websites and I've aggregated all this data about, whatever it is you're asking about. Those, as I understand it, those are not hitting your website. Those are hitting the cache. So those are...
Oh, interesting. Okay, I did not know
I think.
Yeah.
Now, they can browse the web. And if you say to Gemini, what's at this URL, then in real time, it will go and hit that URL, I think. But I think the queries it's doing, when it's doing that AI mode fan out, I think all those queries are just hitting the Google index. And so I don't think you're going to see those in any kind of measurement or analytics on the...
Okay.
I could be wrong about that. But
yes. Yeah. Makes sense.
And because the other thing that I've read recently that is making me think hard about this is Google shutting off their search API. I don't know if you saw that news.
I don't think I saw that one. No.
So, sorry, Microsoft shutting off the search API. So, previously anyone could self-serve to get access to the Bing search results API. And I think the announcement was Microsoft is going to continue supporting its major partners. So folks like DuckDuckGo, I mean, OpenAI is like kind of in bed with part of Microsoft anyway, who knows? But they're not making that generally available anymore. And I think this was before the AI mode announcement, but it was already sending me down that rabbit hole of thinking they've realized how valuable a search index is in an LLM world. And there's all this talk of the LLMs cannibalizing search traffic, but I think actually there's also, you've got to realize the other way around. If you have an LLM without search capabilities, it's really limited. And an awful lot of sometimes you go to an LLM and you're asking it to do something completely new, right? Write me a thing in the style of a Shakespeare sonnet or whatever. Like, it doesn't need to do a search to do that. It just does it from its brain. But when quite often you're saying, is this better than that? And it has to go and it has to go and do some searches to get that latest data. And that's the retrieval augmented stuff. And I think there's this realization that actually a search index is, if not a differentiator, certainly a prerequisite to having a successful AI model.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine because you're betting on someone not going to Google, and that helps your kind of LLM grow. And if you don't have that capability, then that's pretty problematic.
You want to be able to answer those queries as well, don't you?
Right. Yes, it'd always be second best, if not pretty dated.
And that's where, exactly. And some data couldn't possibly be in the training data, right? If you're asking about, last night's NBA Finals game or, whatever it might be, you always need some way of bringing in new data. And freshness, I think the story of Google over the years has been the power of freshness. And they've been continually realizing that fresher is better across
everything.
Everything. We went down a little rabbit hole there. So backing out slightly, one of the things, so connected to that, it's been surprising to me how spam-free Google's regular web search index has stayed. And I'm trying to socialize this question across lots of different folks because I feel like I'm going crazy and maybe I'm some kind of outlier because there's been a lot of talk about search results getting worse, right? The search quality getting worse. And I'm not convinced that's what Google is seeing internally, right? If you read Hacker News, every other thread is about, Google's dead, it doesn't work anymore, all this kind of stuff. I haven't seen any signs of the kind of code red that would be happening inside Google if their searcher satisfaction scores were going down. I think people genuinely are happier with some of the stuff that we as professional searchers maybe don't like as much. And I'm just kind of curious if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, agreed. I've never been I'm generally a positive person, so I never felt they were that bad. Of course, I'm biased because we contribute to a ton of them at scale. So there might be that. And I do think a lot of that happened immediately post Reddit visibility ascension, as it were. And they're generally good, like helpful diversification of a result to see if you drop into a thread and you quickly get 20 different answers from 20 different people, hypothetically, or the upvote mechanism, assuming it's not manipulated, which it often could be. It can be helpful in videos as well. So I think they're generally doing a good job. And people care about brands, and a lot of the spammy behavior occurs off brand, like for non-brand sites that will take that risk. And that's some of the worst stuff. And I think people will perceive the content as good, even if it does come from a good brand, even if it's not that great, unfortunately.
Yeah. Actually, that ties into something else I was going to ask you about, which is the human connection and the individual authors and folks behind the production of the content. Do you get asked, or what's your thinking on exposing the individual humans who contributed or who produced different pieces of content?
I think it's a great idea. We're a mix of in-house and external. For a long time we were only in-house, and as the EAT thing got louder and louder, it had to take kind of a gut check and be like, we can't realistically say we have like gastrointestinal experts full time at Siege, but we can find a balance by finding those in a freelance network where appropriate. And I do highly recommend to people to put those authors, but there's limits. I do see it extended to markets that I don't think people care that much. Like if it's a SaaS product, I don't think you need like reviewed by, if it's not your money or your life, but your audience in retail, there is a lot of like, obviously health component, and a lot of those reviewed by makes a ton of sense in a lot of consumer verticals. So bubbling it up, and we do recommend that the client use their own team members if they're comfortable with that, and green light the topic, review the topic, and put their name associated with it if they're comfortable. But we always have the expertise as well if they want us to use our bylines.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm very curious to see where that goes. As we simultaneously, it feels like we anonymize a lot of this stuff by pushing it through the AI meat grinder. And at the same time, actually for the first time, have the tools and capability to evaluate everything somebody said over their career and actually get some sense of their real expertise and kind of say, oh yeah, this aligns with what we've learned about this person's expertise.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I do feel like the LLMs are doing a good job of kind of interpreting review volume. Like that's something I continue to think about, especially on the consumer side. I mean, just recommendations are good, but like how do we help clients just accelerate the review volume at scale? Like that seems like such an important component, even if it's like working with affiliate partners to do a review of a product. Like if you don't have that saturation, that feels like the biggest like PR to me. Like in consumer would be go out and get a lot of reviews, even if you're paying for those. Hopefully if they're on authority sites, and that will hopefully lead to other positive things. But that feels critical. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I think there's something to that, back to the long tail point, that's likely to be the best source of, those kind of long tail insights, isn't it? Does this work in this situation, or is this good for this weird edge case? It's going to come from your review data as well. Because folks, ultimately you have to get that from some kind of real world interaction. You can't just kind of sit as an AI and think up those things.
Yeah. And that's a great call out. That, I mean, there's many e-commerce companies that don't have product level review data, but like in the world of AI, that feels increasingly critical. Obviously, threading that needle of what feels on brand for like a super premium product may be difficult, or low volume product where you only have 3 reviews may be difficult, but to get that long tail, I agree. It seems important increasingly.
Who are you really looking up to, either around like thought leaders in the space or brands who are doing this well? Like, obviously, feel free to call out any of your team who folks would be following, but more broadly, who are you inspired by, or think, I wish we'd worked on that?
Oh, from a brand standpoint,
either side, yeah.
This is moving so fast, I can't specifically point to one explicit call out, unfortunately. I do think Kevin, from a thought leadership standpoint, Kevin Indig in our space is doing a great job. That's not a brand, but he increasingly is putting out great thought leadership stuff that I'm not seeing a lot elsewhere, including on the e-commerce side. So I think he's great to look at. But I mean, it really is, in terms of cutting edge SEO. I mean, so much going to who's just the best brand in a lot of ways, and that's where my mind is going. So it's almost like I do need to do a deeper dive on the SEO part, because it's kind of the accelerant, and so much of the brand seems to be pulling stuff up primarily.
That's another of your resources that folks should check out, which we should link, is the conversation you had with Dr. Pete over at Moz, where you talked about brand authority, which he's been thinking about a lot recently, and that kind of joins those dots between the SEO world and the measures of brand and the, I guess, signals of brand that we all start thinking about how can we micro optimize that, because that's just how an SEO's mind works. But actually, it's much bigger than that, I think, and it's much more about how it really resonates. And I think it's been true in search going all the way back. I think it was the Vince update. Was that like 2008? That was Eric Schmidt first saying, brands are how we sort out the cesspool of the internet, I think, if I've got his quote correctly. So, Google's been big on brand signals going back well over a decade. But I agree, it does just feel unfair. At the scale, it's true these days.
Yeah, the way I've been thinking, and Kevin, which is why I shouted him out, he specifically gave me this thought on our podcast, is today's world SEO, you'd be like, I need more SEO budget. But I think a great way of thinking about it now is like using a competitive research tool like a Rival IQ, which I've never used, no association with. But it will take a dashboard of all your competitors and see their relative like social media strength, like what is the engagement rate, how many followers they have. Same with brand stuff. I mean, I know SEO tools, brand authority is great. And I'm guessing Moz looks at some of those things like brand search growth, but what are they doing on the PR side? Like how many mentions are they getting? And then if you put that into a like comprehensive competitive dashboard, you can say, oh, we should actually we're doing fine on PR side, but we should be investing more in social. And as an SEO, I want to actually argue that we go spend $10,000 a month on social media if I'm going to win on search, would be how I think about it in 2025. And that kind of brand health dashboard, I thought, from a non-SEO metric, felt like a modern way of thinking about search performance.
Yeah, I've always thought we have access to some of the best sources of data about other channels. We've got pretty good sources of data about our own channel, but we also have all of that, like you say, stuff like branded search is being able to find out what folks are searching for and how that's trending is such a powerful, like regular brand play. But I'm sure the experts in that area are all over that. It does make me think of when you talk about where to allocate that investment. SEO has always been a kind of a funny one to think about budget-wise, because what does it mean to spend money on SEO? It could be anything from engineers to designers to content writers to you name it. Or as you're saying, could be something around the brand play. And one of the things that we have seen in e-commerce in particular is a lot of SEO folks moving closer to product, either sitting in the product org, reporting to the product org, at least being matrixed into the product org. But there could be some kind of selection bias there, because obviously that's the kind of team we're working with. And so I was curious if you've been seeing the same thing on your side.
Yes, definitely. I mean, one of the things we briefly were going to talk about, we could tie it in here, is just, I think a new like search thing today is you need to be doing other things productive at the same time to kind of like justify the long-term defensibility of that strategy. Because it both contributes to brand if you're doing it more directly, like making the product better usability, better user experience. That has justification outside of search. And then it feels like is why search is going to do well also today. And same with content. Like if we can actually make an argument, our content section will get visits independent of search by the design of that, the information architecture that gives it rationale. And of course we'll do better because of that. So like on the product teams, that was, I see a lot of that. We had a great conversation and I'll pull it up. I don't want to misspell her name, but on product SEO specifically on our podcast. And that gave me the aha of just the need to kind of diverge from just technical as a mindset, but rather product SEO as a mindset, because that's close to the money. That's close to where this thing is going. And that's Sharanya, who's at Boat Setter now. But we had a good conversation.
Yeah. Actually, I remember that conversation. I remember reading the transcript, and it was, there's a lot of smart thinking embedded in there. So we should definitely link that out for folks as well. As we start to wrap things up and draw it to a conclusion, one of the things that I've found to be a really interesting source of conversation with a few folks recently is coming from the SEO side. We tend to be optimizers, also optimists. Many of us, you mentioned that. And there's a lot of overlap between how we strive to improve things for our clients and our customers, as well as how we run our own business. And that kind of bleeds into personal life as well. You and I have been sharing, workout and basketball and health tips and ideas. And the one of the things I've found really interesting is that optimizer and goal setting mindset. And so I'm just curious if you've got any great resources or things you've been taking inspiration from recently that spread across that from your personal life into running your business into the work that you're doing for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of starts. I used a service called My Body Tutor, which was super helpful for just health advice, and that diverged. And then I found a community of people who play basketball in the morning, and that helped. And I think having that consistency and that feedback from them, I for a long time I was like, I can figure this out myself. And then I finally got some coaches. I was like, there's still optimizations there that are helpful. I mean, I think there's a longer conversation of, is consistently optimizing every single part of your life healthy? Is that like healthy? Probably not. I don't know. I'm trying to always walk that balance. Curious your thoughts on that. But I am consistently trying to kind of fix with that. One thing I have found helpful in that process is systems that maybe I think broadly could be useful for people. I've done something called like my perfect calendar, and I like create that on Google Calendar as a week. It's just like a week of what the perfect week looks like. And there is balance in there. It's like breakfast with my wife on Tuesdays. It's a date night with her. It's one social event. It's doing basketball. And then like, I can always pull that up and be like, am I true to this? I color code accordingly in blocks. So it's pretty easy to see like, I actually stayed true to this. And that, I think consistency has helped me on the business side and would help other people, hopefully, do similar, if that makes sense, what I'm describing. Yeah,
it does. Yeah, I haven't done that, and that sounds like an interesting exercise. I've always been, I kind of have a not very well mapped out thing in my head of how my energy ebbs and flows through a working day or a working week. But I know some folks have really got value from leaning into that. You're saying, I should take my meetings, in the early afternoon. I should block the morning for deep work. I should do these different things at different times. I do that informally. But yeah, a perfect calendar exercise sounds. So you actually have it like embedded in your. I see you've set up a separate calendar that looks like that, so you can just toggle that on and off and like cross reference.
Exactly, like check in on it once a month. Yeah, we're showing this on video, and here I am doing a podcast off calendar. So do as I do, not as I. Sometimes.
Well, that's because I'm on the wrong time zone. So
good.
You had to schedule around me. Yeah.
But the general idea, is helpful for like giving a check-in, looking backwards. I forget where I originally found this concept. I definitely didn't make it up, but that's one thing I think to go back to the balance while still being good for business. That has been instructive, I think.
Yeah. I think I may have said to you when we were in person, but one of the things I found, I had a weird mental block against trying to more deliberately improve certain areas, particularly around kind of health and fitness, and carving that time out. And I kind of felt guilty of like I was either pulling it away from family time or I was pulling it away from running my business time.
Yes.
And the phrase that unlocked it for me was very similar to the "you play like you practice," right? That coaches always drilled it, that sports coaches always drilled it, and you can't just turn it on game day. Is I forget where the quote came from, but somebody saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And that it is healthy and fine to have goals in every part of your life. And that doesn't push away from, the fact that I might be taking training more seriously doesn't take me away from being ambitious in the business context. In fact, quite the opposite. And I've definitely, once I've unlocked the mental block, I've definitely found the physical unlock of finding, you have more energy, you're more resilient, you can work in a more focused way. So that's definitely something that I found useful.
Do you set like tight goals, or are you like, do you set like 3-year big hairy audacious goals, or what's your goal setting practice? I
am by instinct an optimizer. I'm very much a follow the process goal. So I'm like my workout goal is likely to be, work out 4 times a week, for example. Much more so that it's going to be add 3 inches to my vertical leap, or some kind of outcome focused thing. And that's where I naturally gravitate towards. And I think I'm often the same in business as well. I tend to set incremental, let's improve this, let's improve that type goals. And I very consciously have tried to develop and work on the skill of setting big goals, because I think they're important for long run motivation, alignment, vision, and team cohesion. And I talk about it a lot actually with the COO at SearchPilot, Craig Bradford, who he is very much naturally the outcome goal setter. So he took we use a process called 4DX within SearchPilot with the 4 disciplines of execution. It's like OKRs, but like simpler. And he ended up setting some in his personal life around like his 10K time and all this stuff. And he's always been very much like outcome focused. So, and I guess that makes us hopefully a good team. But it's a bit of a journey for me.
Yeah, I have same. I mean, my gut is I'm not saying he's not a happy person, but somehow just being in the process, but I've been similar, and I know there's shortcomings to not having like a 3-year, and literally working on that this year myself as well. So maybe there's something in the water of like I need to set longer term horizon things, not just iterate the next month, which I've done for 12 years. Yeah, for
sure, a deeper, longer conversation, and one that I definitely need to have with a wide range of people, because I find it one of those people who are good at it. There's something magical about being able to set either the kind of crazy target that you immediately think is totally unachievable, but somehow you stay motivated because even a miss is incredible. And that kind of, I mean, without getting into any of the politics side of it, that's the kind of classic Elon Musk overpromise repeatedly and somehow still end up with something amazing somewhere along the way. And I've always found I can't naturally do that. I find it too embarrassing to repeatedly miss, and I end up kind of downgrading the kind of big, hairy, audacious part of the goals, and then they just don't work. And so, there's definitely some skills and learning development.
Yeah, there probably is something to just like balancing out your team with the right people, and that might be it. It's like lean into your strengths, kind of have the team members to balance you out. But yeah, we do need to, as leaders, probably do that as well. There's always a balance for sure, especially in today's world. Things are so rapidly changing. We gotta. But we're iterating through it.
And having that consistency of vision through the fact that, Google's rolling out some new thing, OpenAI is doing something new, some new startup we haven't even heard of yet is going to be doing something radically different next week. It's like having both the flexibility and the vision and the kind of consistency of purpose is, that's why it's fun and interesting and exciting, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a 3-week vision now is the new 3-year vision.
3-week vision.
That's really long-term thinking.
Long-term. You just spend your entire time planning and replanning. On which note, probably a good place to gradually draw things to a close. We're going to push out some of the links of things that we've specifically talked about today, but more generally, where is a good place to find you on the internet these days and hear the latest and greatest from you personally or from Siege generally?
LinkedIn's great. I'm sharing mostly on LinkedIn, other networks as well, but definitely the most long form on LinkedIn. Our blog, we're hoping to publish more data studies. That's my 3-year vision. So hopefully we get more of those.
Well, if you can get any done in the next 3 weeks, that'd be great. And I, as we've said, I've referenced a couple through the course of the conversation. So people are reading them; they are valuable. I've definitely been
ditto. You guys have the best stuff. So thank you for all your A/B testing tests; those are super valuable in the industry.
Appreciate it. We just try and put out the things that we always wished had existed. So back when I was in my consulting days, I wish somebody was publishing this kind of test result data. So
great content strategy. I'm like, that is good.
Yeah,
right there.
Well, on that note, thank you for your time today, Ross. Sorry for busting into the wrong bit of your perfect calendar, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in person and many future calls to come. So
thank you, Will.
Have a good one.
Good catching up.